Well, you've heard a lot tonight about how things were a lot more informal in those days, and they certainly were. I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I got started and the informality of that. I owned a MGTD, like everybody else in those days, and a friend of ours, Bill Kinchlow, owned an identical car, and we went up to Watkins Glen to watch the races. First time either one of us had ever seen a race. And this was in the fall, naturally. We watched the race, and we found somebody told us, you know, they race these little cars in Florida in the wintertime. Bill and I thought it would be a real good idea to take a vacation in Florida, and so we decided we would go down and enter the race at a place called Sebring. And in those days, the 3As ran all the racing, and 3As ran Sebring. We had seen at this point one race, so we towed my car down, took the wheels off Bill's, because we heard you needed more than one set of tires to run a 12-hour race. So we towed my car down and hauled the Bill's spare wheels and tires. And when we got down there, we went out to the race course and found the desk that was there. It had 3As up above it, and said we want to go in the race. And he said, fine, sign right here. We signed, and he says, okay, you're in the race, go. And we hadn't seen the course. We'd seen one race in our lives. And so we went out. We both got in the car together. We only had one helmet. The driver naturally wore the helmet. And we practiced with two in the car, because we figured we'd learn twice as fast. And did all our practice with two in the car. We'd just switch positions and take the helmet off and switch to the driver. We happened to have a little problem, and they had steel barrels marking the course. It was an airport course. And one of us, I don't really remember which, hit one of the barrels and cut a tire. So we were one tire short, because we only had 7 tires then. So we wandered around in the pits, and we saw this very handsome gentleman in the pit area there with a whole bunch of tires, and we noticed that at least one of them was the tire we needed. And so we asked him if we could buy one. And he said, well, of course. It was Breed Cunningham, as a matter of fact. We didn't know his name then. And so he sold us a tire for about $5, I think. So we'd have 8 tires. And he asked us, he said, how many tires do you have? We said, 8. He said, well, why did you want this one? You had 7 others. And we said, well, you got to change tires. He said, not on MG, you won't. We want to be prepared. With my car, I started the race, and we had maybe 2 hours practice, I guess, between the two of us. So we really weren't real sure what we were doing. Fortunately, that they started. This was all daylight, except the last couple of hours. So that gave us a lot of time to learn before we really got serious about it. I have movies at home that I would like to show sometime about our first pit stop, because I had a group of dentists and Bob McKenzie as my pit crew, and when I came in, we have the pictures, you know, car pulls into the pits, everybody's eating lunch, nobody moves. The car pulls into the pit, and I'm sitting there looking around, everybody's sitting there, hi. I get out of the car, go over and get a sandwich. Finally, somebody wanders around with a gas can, starts pouring some in, and somebody looked under the hood, not knowing what was under there or what to do if they saw anything, put the hood back down. I took the helmet off, gave it to Bill Kinchlow, he put the helmet on, wandered around and got back in. We figured 12 hours is a long time. Pretty hurrying. And as the race wore on, the poor little car, for some reason, kept on running fine. And Greek was right, we never did change any tires. Those were hard tires. And the car wouldn't go very fast either. About halfway through, or a little more, all of a sudden we found we were passing a lot of cars that had been passing us all day. And we couldn't understand why. So the off driver went over to some of the other pits and asked them, how come everybody's going slower? And we're running out of brakes. And the faster cars, all drum brakes in those days, they all ran out of brakes. But the MG, of course, didn't go fast enough for that. But most of the turns out on the airport course were faster than our little car would go. So we were flat out most all the way. We only put the brakes on maybe twice a lap, something like that. And with the built-in headwind that thing had, you slowed down in an awful hurry just taking your foot off the throttle. Sure enough, late in the afternoon, why, we were one of the faster cars there, believe it or not. But they had a lot of Jaguars and 120s in those days, and a lot of the small English true racing cars, and they were all running out of brakes. We ended up, I think we were 4th in class and 8th overall. Out of maybe 40 very expensive race cars. There were Ferraris and everything. They all ran out of brakes because they all had drum brakes, and they all went real fast. And we noticed toward the end of the race our little engine was making a little more noise than it did when we started. But it finished, and we towed it back home. And had to do a total rebuild on the engine. The crankshaft was a little bit out of round, a few things like that. But it staggered all the way through. And as I say, shows you in a long distance race, you got to finish. And if you can finish at speed, why you do even better.